Hey, Rob Hardy.
Hey, Michael Ashcroft.
Thank you for coming on my YouTube channel, which is not a podcast, but is a place for conversation with friends. Um, Done one with Jake Roth one already, and that was well received. And it's great to have you as well to make the playlist look longer, if nothing else. How are
Heck
you doing,
yeah.
Rob?
I don't like that I'm not the first one, but
I'm
I
sorry. I'm
will
sorry.
I will be happy at number two. Yeah.
So for the
I'm doing
benefit
good, man.
of,
It's
we've got a lag. We've got a lag.
yeah,
Oh
go ahead.
no.
Oh no.
Oh no. This is going to be interesting. I wonder if we want to keep recording and see how it goes, and just like point out to people who are watching that we have a lag and do our best to manage it. See how it goes. So I will now ask, "How are you doing, Rob?" and then not talk for a while.
Yeah, I'm seeing the lag too, but I'm doing good, and I like this challenge of seeing if we can like beat the technology. Like the technology is trying to stick it to us, but we're like, fuck you, Ecamm Live. We won't be stifled today. Yeah, I like that. But otherwise, man, I'm good. I'm feeling really calm, really grounded, and I like the concept of not a podcast, but just two homies like
Mm.
their doing their thing. It feels so much more naturalistic than I don't know trying to make content for the internet. Like, I've had enough of that. Ready for just like more connection, more like genuine authenticity. So I'm stoked to be here, man.
Cool. No, thank you for playing along. We have been talking pretty regularly for like at least a year, I would say. So I feel like I know you pretty well. It's been more than a year, I think, actually. But for the benefit of those who maybe are just encountering you now, who are you? In as many or few words as you want, like who are you and
Mm.
what do you do on the internet, if you like?
It's funny because I would have had one answer to that prior to meeting you, and I think my answer to it is different now, and a lot of that is your fault. Because I don't know, it feels like I kind of divide my life as a person on the internet into like pre Michael Ashcroft phase and like post Michael Ashcroft phase, and so much of it comes down to breaking patterns of rigidity. Um, that feels like the overarching theme of everything that I've got going on these days. And so I'll just say like the broad area where most of my writing and whatnot is focused is marketing, creative shit, ostensibly like 1,000 True Fans, the whole Kevin Kelly, like don't make a living by like going big and trying to reach the masses and sort of like watering yourself down and being generic, but go small, go niche. Don't seek to be louder, but seek to matter more to a small handful of the right people and build your business and your life around that paradigm. Um, Broadly speaking, like what I do is I help people make that a reality. Creative people, intellectual type people, really anybody who has something to say, and whether it's through like traditional creative or artistic means, or whether it's people with interesting, potentially world changing ideas, like those are my people. But to bring it back around to like what I was saying before is like I used to be a very traditional marketer. And like you know this, like I used to be like niche guy, like that was my fucking thing. I'd be like find your niche, and I was very precise and prescriptive in terms of like what that meant and how to do it, and then like building out crazy rigid systems and like all sorts of market research and the whole yards in terms of like how I approached this idea of like creating fans and building something you cared about. And you were kind of the one who disabused me of that rigidity. And part of it was coming to you and like hiring you as a coach, for something unrelated to marketing. Like we were talking about sort of my relationship to food and exercise at the time, but also just like watching how you built your Alexander technique course, and then without doing any of the stuff that I thought was required to build a course business online, like the email marketing and the funnels and the launches and like all the elaborate shit that I was so invested in. Like you sold this really kind of weird esoteric course and nobody knew what the fuck Alexander technique actually was. Um,
Many still don't.
Mostly, yeah. I still don't know that I do. And I've been hovering in your world and I've taken your course like twice. and I still am just like, whatever.
That's reasonable.
um, but yeah, there's something there around watching you do this just by mostly being a friendly guy on Twitter that completely broke my brain, and that sort of like sent me spiraling in this direction of like how how can I replicate that? Because like the thing underlying all of this is that I was never that comfortable with all the rigid marketing systems and principles and practices. Like it never really resonated with me, and I always felt like I couldn't really just like be myself and have fun. And then watching you do that with, so you basically modeled a new way of being in the world for me. Um, and now I feel like I'm existing in this place of bridging the gap between like people who are really dissatisfied with, you know, like the creator economy or the online business, online marketing space, like really earnest people who don't vibe with that stuff, and bridging the gap into this new world where we're kind of just having fun and making friends and being nerdy, like the friendly, it's, you know, it's the friendly ambitious nerd thing.
Mm,
um, so I've been talking for a really long time, but like that's the kind of the scope of the world I'm
mm.
existing in. I'm sure there's more, but yeah.
No, it's awesome, and it's been great watching you as well go on that journey. Because from my perspective, I just showed up and was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna just say stuff, and it turns out it works out quite well. But you know, I had no illusions as to I have a plan here, if you like. So I consider myself very fortunate in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But having seen you go through the kind of noticing there was a different way of doing things from having come from somewhere else, that was really interesting to me. And I think it kind of touches on the the general container for this conversation, which is aliveness and the pursuit thereof. Almost, I'm really curious from like your perspective. What
Yeah.
was, if you can like roll back the clock almost, the felt sense of what it was like to be old Rob in online marketing world? What did it feel like to be him as contrasted to now, almost?
Yeah. So it's interesting because like a lot of this was before I had like any somatic awareness at all. Like I was a very disembodied person, very much in my head. But broadly speaking, it was just heaviness. So much heaviness, so much. I'm trying. I don't know. It's interesting. It's like actually getting the work done to build all of these systems and funnels and to do all the persuasion hacks or whatever dumb shit I was up to. Um, it felt so sluggish and tedious getting that work done. And like there was that really heavy sense of like perfectionism, that really heavy sense of imposter syndrome, like sort of like all of the underlying resistances kind of just came out in full force anytime I was like doing a course launch and trying to really sell something or shill
Mm,
something. Um, and it was just so clear that the way I was operating was out of alignment with how I wanted to be in the world and how I wanted to show up. But then there was that other part of me that didn't believe that there was any other way to operate. So it's
mm,
like I want to have an online business, and even though I don't necessarily resonate with the way things are, with the status quo, like I have to
mm,
do this because this is just the way things are done. And I got to suck it up and put on my big boy pants. And it just, like, it's not I don't know, it just felt like being at war
mm,
with myself. And then there's all sorts of, you know, shame around, like, I don't know if shame is the right word. There's some shame. And then there's like, looking around these ecosystems and being like, why does it seem to be so easy for everybody else? Which I think is a lie. Anybody who's saying this stuff is easy is generally lying, or trying to sell you something. But yeah, I think that's broadly what it was. Is just like lurching from like one ill-conceived campaign, like marketing campaign, one launch to the next, always chasing that one big thing that would finally like crack open my business and make it what I
mm,
wanted to be. Is like once I finally have a $10,000 month or a $10,000 launch or like whatever it is, like then I will finally have the room to just be how I want to be. But until then, I just have to
Mm.
keep forcing myself to do all of this shit that I know deep down is not who I am or how I want to show up. But
Mm.
yeah, but it was just kind of wave of suffering after wave of suffering is the like the really shitty way that I'd put it. And I just kept enduring it because I'm stubborn.
Well, you were stubborn, and also like it was your job essentially. Like as you were talking there about the other people doing this thing, it reminded me of the corporate normal career work environment where like even if you recognize that
Mm.
it's not a great thing for you, you still haven't got that much choice about what you do. Like, and plenty of people seem to do it really well, but there's still, you know, how much do you believe that they're non-forced and just flowing into it versus like, well, I got to feed the kids. I gotta, this is my only option. And if I had a different option, it would look a lot like this one, right? There's not much degrees of freedom there, which is a big thing to do with aliveness. So what I heard from you there was like there's a sense of almost grasping or clinging to like, I need to make money, dude. Like I need to survive, and this is how I'm living. This is how I'm paying my bills. It matters. It's important, and that process can really interfere with a sense of aliveness in my experience. Um, and something I think
Yeah.
we've both been looking into around this whole non-coercion thing of like, there's a bit of a warning here because coercive frames do work. They're not all ideal, but they do work. They get shit done. Um, and there's a bit of a warning label on it of like, if you start, you have to finish. Because once you've started to deconstruct your motivation systems and you one day you realize, oh, I just can't keep forcing anymore. I can't keep doing the old thing. Uh-oh. I guess I've got to keep going this way and see where I end up. Um, it's not straightforward and it's not trivial and it's not something I'd even casually recommend to people who can't change their environments. But it sounds like you went on that journey of like, look, I just can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. I can't do it. I need something new. What is that new thing? Let's go. That's kind of the impression I get from you.
Yeah. That's the correct impression. So I have like two different strands of thought here. And I guess they're both related. Like one is like the thing that I've most changed my mind about over, I don't know, the last 2 years, however long I've been doing, like undergoing my beautiful metamorphosis or whatever the fuck. So I used to be kind of like, in regards to online business and online marketing, like I used to be make a living as quickly as you can guy, like go hyper niche, make some sort of like high ticket offer. It's usually coaching or consulting. Like do whatever you need to do to make your business meet your needs quickly. um, which I don't know, I'll get into this in a second, but like the so I was basically in a prison of my own making with my business until 2020, until the pandemic. And it was in that place where it was like paying my bills. I was making enough to survive, but it still never felt like enough. But there was never a sense that I could do anything else because I'd invested so much. There was sort of like this. I forget what the phrase is like you've invested so much that you feel like you have to keep investing. Um, but it wasn't until like the pandemic came along and the lockdowns, and it was just like this giant pattern interrupt, and then the government started giving out like free money and shit like that, that made it feel okay to start exploring and going off in new directions. And there was something about like those 2 or 3 early months of the pandemic, so like March, April, May, where for some reason I was able to like really look at my business from a detached vantage point and see how much suffering it was causing and see how to out of alignment I was feeling with the people I was ostensibly serving. Because like my first business was serving the indie filmmaking community, but over the years I kind of lost my zest and my passion for filmmaking. But because I was, my livelihood depended on being there, I just kept running this business and kind of pretending to be something that I knew deep down that I wasn't anymore. But then the pandemic came along and it was like,
Mm.
oh shit, I'm actually not a filmmaker. I can't ignore this anymore.
Mm.
So there was just like this little space where I was able to start exploring, and that's kind of what led me into Twitter and eventually into Teapot and into your world, into Visa's world. Like all of these people kind of somehow ended up on my radar, and I somehow weaseled my way in. But I think back to this topic of aliveness, and the place that I've changed my mind is trying to make a living as quickly as possible with an online business is like a surefire way to kill aliveness. I've seen it again and again and again, um, because it forces you to sort of like go hyper niche, follow all of these best practices. And we'll probably rail against best practices at some point. But it basically leads to you doing a bunch of things that don't quite feel in alignment with how you want to be in the world, but you do them anyway because you're operating from this place of financial insecurity or financial scarcity. Um, and then you end up, building this prison for yourself where you feel like you're trapped by the need to keep feeding this machine that is meeting your financial needs. Um, so where I've kind of come out is having a newfound respect for day jobs or for anything that you need to do to have financial security and also the space to explore your aliveness, like whatever that thing is, and to let it actually breathe and grow and expand
Nice.
without putting a shit ton of pressure on it early on. Because like there is something here where if you allow your aliveness to kind of play in the world and you use it as a way to find the others, to go out and weave your way into communities and make friendships and find these corners of the internet where you feel really at home and where your aliveness is actually rewarded, um, by these communities that you're entering, like that can be the foundation on which you build a really great business. But it takes time and it's uncertain, and it might be a year, it might be 2 years before you really have that foundation in place. And if you put too much pressure on it too early, you just inevitably end up killing the aliveness. And
Mm.
I think after 5 years of my first business, like 4 or 5 years, and having seen how dead it was the entire time, and knowing how it is to just like live like that, like I don't want to see other people make that same mistake. And it's like 99% of what happens in the creator economy
Mm.
is people sort of like going like hyper niche to make as quick a living as possible. Um, but I've just seen so many people burn out from that
Mm.
and grow to build a life that they end up resenting, growing to resent their audience, the way they have to make a living, feeling like they just have to keep telling people what they want to hear, even if it's
Mm.
not what they believe anymore. And it's just not a way to live like a good, enriching life.
Yeah, and from my observation of creators on the internet, it seems like it's a trap that you can fall into over and over again. So you might start out with this alive, yeah, I'm free and open and available, and I can go anywhere, and yeah, this is great. I'm really like enjoying myself. And then at some point they'll be like, oh, hang on, now I've just made some money, or I have a good product, and people expect this thing from me. I'll double down on that thing. And there's nothing wrong with doubling down. Like I think is it Jay and Nathan Barry talking about like, are you building a skyscraper or a strip mall type thing? I'm
Mm.
not saying you
Yeah,
can't build
yeah,
a skyscraper, but it seems like there's a way in which people build the skyscraper that prevents them from also doing anything else, if you like. And that sense of freedom and nimbleness that they had at the beginning is kind of gone. So it feels like there's some kind of move of like, I'm about to become like unalive, dead in my business. How do I like step out of that over and over and over again? And this is again also pure Alexander technique, but like, how do I keep putting down the fixation on this dead thing that I know in 2 years' time will not cause me joy? And it feels like you're like living that process over and over again now that you've stepped into this world. Like, okay, keep wanting to get stuck, no. Keep wanting to get stuck, no. And like learning how to unstick yourself over and over again.
yeah. Ooh, I have thoughts about all of that. Oh my god, I don't even know where to go other than to say like you just hit on like my kind of guiding principle, which is to be self-renewing, or I'm using the word regenerative a lot these days, even though it has
Mm.
sort of like agriculture connotations as well. But um, there's something here around perceiving myself as a self-renewing organism, like somebody who's constantly dipping back into the well looking for aliveness and bringing it up to the surface and like playing with whatever that thing is in the real world. um, but not there. It's basically like letting go of the attachment of the need to find the thing or the right answer.
Mm.
And it's interesting, right? Because and you and I both have talked about this. It's like I have a pretty big long term vision and some like really big picture questions or problems that I want to sort of like play around in and poke at. It's sort of like the guardrails of the container that I've built for myself. But I feel like even though I'm traveling in this direction, I don't have a fixed destination. I don't have like a this is my 5 year goal, this is my 10 year goal,
Right.
or any of that. It's really about this process of constantly returning to myself and to what feels alive in the moment. And like so, like the way I like the big way that I've operationalized this is the 7th week sabbatical thing. I know Paul Millard talks about it. It originally came from Sean McCabe, I think, or he might have gotten it from somewhere else. Um, but I basically live my life and especially my business life in these little 6 week chunks where I work 6 weeks on and then take the 7th week off. And at the start of every new work cycle or little work chunk, work sprint, whatever, like it's really part of the process is to be like, what is exciting for me right now? Um, and then I can follow that out into the world, and I have this nice little container with built-in deadlines. Like, so I'm not always like taking on these massive, huge projects that'll take me a year and just drag out forever and be subject to scope creep or whatever. Like, so just like the way that I've organized my life and my time, it kind of forces me into this self-renewing, like cyclical state where I'm always returning back to myself to see what's alive and interesting. Um, and it's been kind of mind blowing that I'm able to create more that way and focus on a whole bunch of different things and allow myself to, I don't know, like there's something really fascinating there around going where the energy is and just being a fluid organism as opposed
Mm.
to like really rigid and top down and like this is how it has to be and these are my Q2 objectives and here's how I'm going to hit them with my KPIs and like whatever the fuck. Like nah, like I've kind of just embodied like fuck around and have fun as a business ethos. And by doing that, it kind of like, I don't know, I get more contact with the real world. I try more random things. I like there's something really interesting there around like not trying to think your way into the perfect business, but just like trying a bunch of random shit and seeing what sticks and seeing what resonates with others, seeing what resonates with you. And so like I've been doing this for 18 months now, and I've landed on a few things that I know that I want to keep doing. Like one of which is the arena, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Um, but yeah, like all of it was kind of trial, just a ton of trial and error and fucking around and finding out and constantly returning back and being like, is this alive right now? Or is this just something I think I should do because past Rob said so? Like,
Mm.
and it's a good way to be, man. 10/10
Nice.
would recommend.
I think let's talk about the arena then, because that's I think a really good illustration of your like emergence of a thing that kind of like sticks the middle finger to the old way almost to some extent. Um, and I'd love to hear where that came from and what you're doing with it.
uh, so it's funny because where it came from is not necessarily where it's going. I think you know this, and I've told a bunch of people this, but where it came from was like a deep frustration with Ship 30 for 30, which most of your followers probably know them just if they're on Twitter. Like it's kind of hard to avoid them if you're on Twitter, but it's basically like the guys who say like, if you want to become a successful internet digital writer person, you have to write our little screenshot essays and you write your atomic essay. Like it's a whole thing. Um, I'm trying to think of like where to go with this. Is like, because this isn't really about Ship 30. It's about like the entire state of people who teach creators, people who teach business, people who teach like online marketing. Is there's a deep prescriptiveness to all of it, which is very, very comforting because most of the people who are trying to learn this stuff are kind of insecure. Like they are aware that they don't know what they don't know. So they go looking to experts and people who seem to have the right answers and who can give them a formula or some step by step process, which then alleviates that really discomfort or like uncomfortable part in our brain that's like, oh no, uncertainty is scary. I need to resolve this as quickly as possible. Um, and so we end up buying fully and wholeheartedly into the answers that other people have come to that might have been the best answers for them, but very often are not the best answers for us. Like I just fundamentally believe that while we share so many similarities, all of us are unique. We all have our own wild tapestry of different interests and values and worldviews and bits and pieces that fundamentally make anything prescriptive, like hyper prescriptive, that comes from somebody else. Like there's going to be something about it that doesn't vibe with our wiring and the way that we best operate if we want to flourish in the world and if we want to be like at one with ourselves and not constantly at war, pushing ourselves to do things we think like we should do. I don't know. There's a whole thing here, but like this is the status quo of online education for creators, for marketers, for business people, whatever, is this really rigid top down approach of here's the answer, here's how you do this, just follow this formula and you will get what you want. And like, I don't know, again, my first business for 5 years was built based on doing that, based on trusting that. And then it never quite worked as well. Like I followed the formulas and it never quite came out as well as it's supposed to. um, and I don't know, this is all just like a roundabout way of saying is like I have become deeply, deeply distrustful of anybody who claims to have the right answer for me, because I've bought into that so many times and it's never ever once worked out in a way. It's like, yes, this is like this person's perfect solution is exactly what I want for myself. So it's kind of like baked into the DNA of Ungated, is like helping people trust themselves and come to their own answers. And I think I think when I was watching Ship 30 and getting like really, really kind of aggravated at them, it was because of the hyper prescriptiveness of what they were doing. And anybody who's seen like a Ship 30 essay, they're all kind of indistinguishable from one another. And they all turn you into like, if you go through this program, you inevitably end up looking kind of like Dickie Bush, the guy who founded it. Like it's basically an industrialized factory that churns out budget versions of Dickie Bush just at a remarkable scale. Um, and so the thing that I came back to for the arena, which this is all like so roundabout and like I swear I will eventually get to the point, but my hypothesis for the arena was like, if Ship 30 and every other online education thing turns you into a lookalike copy of the person teaching it, what would it look like to create something that every time you do it, you look more like yourself? You strip away the rules that you think you have to succeed, that you need to follow in order to succeed, and you actually just have a container where you can tune into what's alive, tune into what's true, and then play with it in the real world. So that's fundamentally what the arena is it's 1 week with an opening ceremony and a closing ceremony, and all we do is strip away all of the nonsense about what we think we should do and tune into ourselves and say like, what is alive, what is a little bit scary, what is my soul or my daimon or like whatever like there's so many different ways we could frame what this is. But what is intuitively exciting for me or worthwhile or true for me right now? And how can I just play with it this week? Not make it a big creative project or sprint, not make it a challenge where I have to ship every day or otherwise I'm a failure. How can I take this thing that is important to me and true for me and then bring it out into the real world in a playful, lighthearted way where I'm kind of dancing at the edges of my comfort zone rather than like really forcing it and pushing it. And I have seen this kind of work wonders for myself as a guy who has always forced it and pushed it. This move of like going to scary places, but then being like, what's the Visa phrase? It's just like LMAO. It's just like fucking around and not taking yourself very seriously, not taking the process very seriously, but in return, like it just it you lose all of the heaviness and the tedium of trying to push through the resistance of trying to do scary things. So yeah, like that's broadly speaking what the arena is you tune into the aliveness and then you go to those places in a way that is both a little bit scary but also lighthearted. Like that's sort of the secret sauce of what this thing is.
That's awesome. I enjoyed the little background from Ship 30. And for anyone watching on Twitter, you can, like I have, mute the term Ship 30 for 30 forever. It just never shows up. It's great. And, you know, no hate towards people who do it. I'm sure it's very useful, but it does flood my timeline with pictures that I never read. So, yeah, no thanks. You said something really interesting about people becoming like the creator they're following, almost. Like if you take my course, you'll become like discount version of me type thing. And this is something I've tried to avoid as well, because I frankly, I'm me. I don't want other me's out there. I want more other people's. And it ties into a thing I figured out, or a perspective that I use when I think about authenticity and like what it means to be authentic. So in the past, I think the expression or the command to be yourself is horribly confusing, because like, how do I be myself? Like what is the self I have to be? And what it ends up being is like you add on more masks, if you like. You add on more behaviors, and like, is this version of me what you meant? Is this a good authentic me to be? We'll see. And I kind of realized that you can go the other way in a sense. So like, when you can be yourself by not doing all the things that aren't yourself, in a sense. And whenever you notice something that isn't you can put it down. And it feels like you are operationalizing that in an online course container, whereby if what Dicky is doing is churning out mini Dickies, which is a strange way of putting that, then then what you're doing is like taking people to those places where they might be trying to be someone else, where, you know, you're not forcing them to go through a vulnerability process. You're not saying like, yeah, growth happens through vulnerability, maximum vulnerability. You're just like showing them that they can be other ways that may be new and surprising to them, and learning to like put down all those things that they may have accumulated, that kind of gunk from other people that isn't in fact theirs, and just in a container is awesome.
Yeah. The word that jumps out there is surprising. Is like, so I just ran the first like paid version of the arena a couple of weeks ago, months. I don't know. Time makes no sense anymore. But the interesting thing that seemed to happen with at least a handful of the people who came in is like they came in with a preconceived idea of what they would work on during the arena. And then I led us through this opening ritual or opening ceremony, which is kind of a guided meditation. I don't know what to call it. I feel weird doing guided meditations. That seems like not a thing that Rob should do. But anyhow, I did it, and like it's sort of this process of stripping away like all of these different things, like the various shoulds that we have, the various stories we tell ourselves about how we're not good enough or what we have to do to succeed, whatever. So it's stripping away, and then there's a tuning in, like a centering process. So it's kind of AT-esque with expanding awareness. It's kind of a physical centering where you're at the edge of your chair, aligning your spine, dropping into yourself. And then I basically am telling people to trust what arises. And I then sort of like ask a series of prompts and questions. And it's like, just notice what arises without judgment, and set it aside for now. Um, and then after that, we like there's a process of like, what's the thing that came up during this that's most alive or intriguing for you, and like that's going to be your intention for the week. But so many people came into this and were like, I had one idea of what I was going to do, but then I went through this meditation or this ritual, and I ended up somewhere completely fucking different that I wasn't expecting. And like that's like the really really cool thing to me about this is like the fact that it could lead anywhere. Like, I don't know, like one of these days I'm gonna like use it to write poetry or something that's way out of my comfort zone, or do like a week of like funny dance moves, or something that, like, all of these things that are kind of light and fun and totally out of the realm of like, how do I do creative work that'll grow my business, but they're more just about something like being a fully expressed human and really listening to those urges to try something new and interesting. And like, yeah, and it's going to those places that you wouldn't expect, that probably aren't even rational in any kind of way, but then doing it anyway. And like increasingly I think that's kind of where the like the excitement is, and where the growth is, and where we start this process of being kind of regenerative humans, or like self-renewing humans, is breaking out of that mental trap of only doing things we think we should do, and experiencing this wider sense of who we are and what we're capable of when we're not just trapped in our heads all the time. Like, that's the coolest shit. And I'm excited to like keep kind of honing this process and seeing more people going through it, because like that's the thing, is like it's not about creative work necessarily. Like ostensibly that's what people come into it, but it's about developing self-trust and expanding your sense of self. And this process of individuation is I don't know, like a kind of a clinical term, but this idea of just kind of experimenting and going places and becoming who you are, like that's what fascinates me, is this sort of like this developmental frame that you and I have talked a little bit about. Like that's the secret sauce of what the arena is.
Man, there's so much here. This is awesome. One thing that really stood out for me was the idea of opening a channel to something else, almost. Like if you come into the arena with like, well, yes, I'm going to write my, like this essay in particular that I've been thinking about for a long time and it's on my list. And then, okay, that's one thing you've thought ahead that you want to do. What else might there be? And then, put that thing down for a while, create a space, don't fill it for a while, and see what steps into it. That is a really interesting frame, because if all you ever do is the stuff that you planned to do, there's no space for spontaneity or something novel, surprising, unfamiliar, weird, that might have some wisdom in it. So I really love the way that you've created that container, and I see big things coming out of it for people who are like, show up saying, I plan to do this thing, and it turns out I actually just wanted to journal or something. I just really wanted to make music. Like, what kind of a gift can you give people where it's like, for this week, this like few hours a day for a week, you are unconstrained. You can put down whatever it is that you thought you had to do and find something new instead. That's really cool. And the other thing that came to me there was the individuation point, which is really interesting around, I wonder the extent to which people have, well, the marketing world, the creative world, have like adopted a whole bunch of other people's stuff. And that might be a necessary like condition of growing up, in a sense. Like, you had to learn the coercive marketing for a while to know enough about the world. But then there's that individuation process talking about of like, okay, that's all of their views. What's my view on this? How do I do it? Rather than just copying other people's stuff. And that's where the individuation comes in of not them. I'm now no longer them. I'm my own thing. And if you can kind of stay unfixated while doing that, then you can have, again, those novel ideas showing up of like, oh, there's new ways of doing this. I don't have to just copy everyone else's best practices, as you love to rage against.
Yeah. I do love me a good rage against best practices. Yeah, you know totally. Me so well. I guess what I'm curious about is like, I don't know if anybody else here knows about playful creativity. I'm curious where you see the overlap there. And I guess like as a like I wanted to see this thing before you ruthlessly murdered it and took it from us. Um, I guess I'm curious to hear more about your philosophy around creativity and like breaking down some of the like the blocks and the tedium and the ways that we are just constantly at war with ourselves in the
Mm.
creative process. Because obviously, like you have such a yeah, it's sort of like the AT approach and the mindful approach and like dropping the rope in the tug of
Mm.
war. Like
Mm. Mm.
I guess I'm just curious to hear about how you have come to think about writing and creativity and following your own aliveness and not turning it into something where you're always having to force yourself.
Mm. I guess I should talk a bit about playful creativity, the thing, before answering that more broadly, because it's a pretty interesting case study in my own journey
Yeah.
on this. How, just because I talk about these things doesn't mean I'm necessarily the best at it or like done in any way. Um,
Yeah.
so playful creativity was a course concept I came up with a while ago, and I'll come back to that later. Um, Kind of built out of some coaching I was doing with a bunch of clients, and it seemed to be working consistently and effectively. The idea of most people who are in a certain thinky, forcey kind of state of mind will be like, I need to do the creative thing. I need to sit down. You're one of them, Rob. Yeah. You need to sit down and do the creative thing. And most people have a voice in their heads, which you can variously call the judge or the drill sergeant or some kind of like character with a whip saying, get on with it, if you like. And again, for most people, the internal response to this voice is one of no, or shut down, or I don't wanna, or I'm scared of you, or something of this nature. And you end up with this weird battle, this tension inside where the drill sergeant-y voice gets louder and louder, and the thing that it's whipping, the thing that it's yelling at, gets more and more shut down, that nothing happens, and there's just this like arms race almost of like fighting and resisting. And the tug of war analogy that you mentioned there is one I came up with, of like, the more that you have pulling on both sides, the more the thing doesn't go anywhere. There's no solution. The way out, almost, unless one side actually wins, the other way out is to put the rope down. And what I've
Yeah.
found is the creative process often flows more easily when you just put the rope down, when you stop yelling, essentially, stop yelling at yourself. The thing that's being yelled at, which unclear exactly what it is, but starts to have its own intrinsic desires, its intrinsic motivations to actually get up there and do stuff when it's not being yelled at. Kind of like a child. If you yell at a child more and more when it doesn't want to do something, I can remember this feeling from being a child. Like, I don't want to do this thing. Being yelled at, I still don't. I mean, I can feel the muscle tension patterns coming in of I don't want to. And even if you then do it, there's a karmic debt that you have to repay in some sense. Like, there's a cost incurred of forcing either someone else or yourself to do something that wasn't really wanted in the first place. So playful creativity was a course built around this frame. But the funny part was that I was excited about it about just over a year ago, and I outlined it. There was a lot going on. It was great. And then I made the mistake of pre-selling it to try and get interest. Like, I'll only make it if there's interest, kind of thing. So I pre-sold the thing for $50, and 50 to 70 people, variously kind of built up over time, bought the thing. And then I got into the trap that I described in the course. And I was like, oh, people are giving me their money. I feel bad. I need to make the thing. But the creative juice is kind of gone now. And every time I went to do it, it felt forcey. It felt like weirdly hypocritical that I was making this thing called playful creativity when my making of the thing did not feel playful. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, but one thing I'm grateful for in myself is that I didn't force my way through it. I didn't go like, well, you promised people this, you have to just make it, because that would have been, I think, the wrong move. So what I did in the end was I just said, hey, everyone, looks like this thing isn't going to get done. Here's a refund for all of you, and you'll get free access when I do make it, because, thanks for your support. And as soon as I did that, I felt a release of pressure that I had put upon myself. So the lesson I'm drawing from this, in a sense, was like, I had more to learn in that entire frame. And my subconscious geniusly created a frame in which I would trap myself and then have to get unstuck as like a, hey, Michael, be humble. You haven't learned this stuff fully yet. And yeah, that was fair, I think. So yeah, just to give a sense of like the teaching of the process to go from, let's say, 4C to less 4C. I'll do it, yeah. 4C to less 4C doesn't mean I'm necessarily the best at being un-4C. It just means that I might be like the most 4C person in the world and have good skills at going from 4C to un-4C. And some people might just be naturally less 4C than me. And I have to recognize that my journey is not done. My journey is in process. But I think it will exist. I do want to make it. I will make it. And the idea of putting the rope down as a means to liberate creative processes, I still think is one that many people benefit from, and I'm looking forward to having the correct frame around that to share it.
Yeah. It's interesting listening to you. Like there's definitely a part of me that's just like, bro, you should have forced yourself to make this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, right? It's like, I think there's this like non-coercion pendulum thing, right? Is like I started like completely coercive and like beating the shit out of myself. And like we'll take like food and fitness as an example, because like that's the area for me that's most, I don't know, like that's caused like the most suffering in my life. And so like right around when we met, I was at like full coercion mode. Like I was into this thing called 75 Hard, and this guy named Andy Frisella, who made that challenge, was like literally the drill sergeant or the dictator in my head, who's like, if you don't do this challenge exactly as prescribed, you're a piece of shit. And like, I don't know, it was a whole thing. And then you kind of like circumvented that. I swung fully to the other side to like, LMAO, I am non-coercion man now. And it's interesting. It feels to me like the pendulum has kind of swung back to the middle. And it feels like I can contextually choose how I want to be based on the scenario in front of me. So like a couple of weeks ago, ironically, this was during the arena, I chose to finally write my big ass article about non-coercive marketing and what that actually means. And it brought up so much resistance. And I felt like I couldn't actually, I couldn't actually do my playful, cheerful, like ILMAO thing. And so I went back to my Force toolkit and is like, I am going to sit my ass in this chair every single morning, and I am going to work on this. If I have to stare at a blank cursor for 30 straight minutes, I'm going to do it. But I need to, and there's something else there around needing to get these ideas out into the world, because I know they're important. And I know that a lot of like the more resistance I tend to feel to something, the more important it tends to be. So there's something interesting there around like choosing to use force for like a brief period of time to actually get something important across the finish line. Mm-hmm. And then going back to generally being like fairly non-coercive in every other aspect of life. But it's interesting, right? Is like coming back to that phrase of like the optimal amount of coercion is not zero. Like is like, and you said it, like realizing that it can be incredibly effective as like a tool in the right scenario. But I think it's when it's our default state and it's the only way that we're relating to ourselves that it becomes like really maladaptive and shitty for our health. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on like the occasional little bit of coercion as a treat.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you actually. That I am not one of those people who thinks that the optimal amount of coercion is zero. There's kind of a frame that's coming up to me now, which is to be truly alive means to be able to think any kind of thought, do anything, go anywhere, kind of have all options available to you, which includes being coercive.
Yeah.
Right. There's still like I might not be coercive, but in a way that I could be if I wanted to be, if you like. And this kind of touches on it's a big conversation of ethics, I guess. But like I know that Jordan Peterson talks about like a strong person is someone who can do harm but chooses not to, in a sense, as opposed to someone who is unable to do harm, who is simply ineffective, ultimately. And there's something similar here around the wise person might be someone who can be coercive but chooses not to be, and also applies it in those moments when it is the right course of action. So I can think of many examples in day-to-day life where, let's say in a job environment, you don't have that much freedom to say, yeah, I don't feel like it right now. Like that just doesn't work. And you know, the world unfortunately is not set up to be maximally non-coercive, unfortunately. And the same thing comes for creative life, I think, sometimes, where I have a deadline. Okay, I don't want to do the thing, but I simply have to. I can try a bunch of different techniques to resolve inner conflict and find intrinsic motivation and whatever it might be. But ultimately, the move of I just have to, and what will I do in response to I just have to, needs to be available, I think. So I'm kind of with you on this one. I would much rather exist in a world where most people were non-coercive most of the time and just generally not force themselves around. But a little bit occasionally, it feels fine, I think, to me. And many people will now be like jeering and hollering from the stalls, I think. But we'll see.
Yeah. I guess so. I guess the thing I was getting at in regards to like playful creativity is like, because I often think about like what's the impact this thing is going to have on my people, right? The people I serve. And I think about something like playful creativity, that even the version of it that came from force, that you had to just like force yourself to get it done, feels like it could be wildly beneficial to a community of people who are chronic overthinkers. And yeah, there's something there around, like I'm wondering if like this urge to, like, it has to come from a place of playfulness, which again is like like you created like the perfect like prison frame for yourself where like there's no right answer. But yeah, it's interesting, like just knowing that it, like even an imperfect version of it could help a lot of people. I guess I'm curious to hear how you think about that.
I guess one of my thoughts around this comes from Alexander technique again, whereby if you are fixated on an outcome, so Alexander called this end gaining, we would say like over fixation on a goal in modern English. That doesn't mean you can't achieve the goal. It means that the way in which you achieve it is different, right? So I could sit down and create the somewhat forced version of playful creativity, and it would be a different product relative to if I made the thing in a playful way. It just would be. It wouldn't be the same thing, because the way in which I show up would be different. And the question comes down to, do I want the forced version to exist in that form, or do I want it to be the playful version later? And the choice I've made up until this point is I want it to be I'm almost now using it as an internal challenge to myself. Of like, can I get out of the bind I've created for myself and make it in a playful way, rather than like create something that will feel like, to me at least, if others might not notice this, but to me at least, I'll know that there'll be a 4C version of it out there. Now, I can definitely see a case for just making like a small contained version. Like now it exists. Okay, cool. The 4C version is done, and I will modify it in a playful way, like iterate on it in a playful way. That I can see that working. I like to overcome the initial resistance. But the general philosophy behind it is, I have wanted to make a playful version of it that exists, not the 4C version of it. And I don't believe it's possible to make the playful version in a 4C way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm I'm super fascinated by it, because I believe that. I buy into that 100%, that there is some difference between the two versions, that it, and like this is where it gets into like weird metaphysical territory where it's really hard to describe like what the fuck is actually happening. But like I think it ties into like why you're such an effective marketer, even though you're doing nothing that looks like actual internet marketing, right? Is because it's a way that you show up in the world that results in people sort of bonding to you and trusting you and wanting to spend more time around you, because there is something about the way you are, your way of being in the world, that is inherently trustworthy and attractive. And making that a goal of like, I am going to build trust, and I am going to do it by showing up consistently and writing my newsletter with these best practices every week, and like whatever the fuck. Like this is 98% of what the marketing world is. 99% is like trying to emulate these things, which really come from like just being embodied in the world and showing up in a particular way. Like there is some underlying weird metaphysical thing that, again, like it's weird and indescribable. And I like, this is part of the big shift from like how I used to think about marketing to how I'm thinking about it now. But I'm so bought into the idea that it's not about what you actually do and put out into the world. It's about the way you are, the way you relate to yourself and relate to others, that is ultimately the thing that gets us what we want, which is trust, which is people actually caring and wanting to spend more time around us. And like, so I don't know exactly what I'm getting at here, but I think the tangible question is like, what in your mind is the difference between forcey playful creativity and playful creativity?
Yeah, it to me it all comes down it comes down to fixation. The analogy that came to my mind when you were talking there was love, actually. Like, it's one thing to tell your partner, "Hey, I love you," and not expect anything in that sentence. It's a very different thing to say, "I love you," and with the energy of, "and I need you to love me," at the same time, like clinging in some sense to their love or to the situation. And the second version, people can feel as some sense oppressive. It's like, you're demanding something, you need something from me. There's a weird fixation and attachment here. And in a sense, the most pure kind of love is one that doesn't require the other person to love you back, or doesn't require any kind of change from them, or like they could leave if they wanted to, and you would be like hurt, but unfixated, if you like. It would be okay, like big picture. And I think there's a similar thing going on in marketing and the online creator world of like, I'm showing up because I need your money, or I need your attention, or I need your adulation. I need you to like reinforce my ego that I am actually a good person teaching good things. And I think even if you're very carefully saying the opposite and whatever, it's still going to be the case that the vibe and tone and all the impressions that humans are very good at picking up on will come up, because we're very, very good at picking up on the subtext. So you can't fake authenticity. You can't fake, because as soon as you try to be authentic, you're not being authentic. This is really important. So I think a lot of the people who are doing this online are just not getting that. And the more they try, this is an interesting thing I think we'll see in the next couple of years of people like following people, and they like following authenticity. So, and people have got this now. It's like, okay, the marketers have figured this out. So like, how do we be authentic? It's the same question again. Like, what are all the signaling things we have to do to be authentic, to get people to trust us? And they will do a fallen version of the thing, which is actually being trustworthy or actually being playful. And that's why I think for the playful creativity thing, it's just important to me that I don't fall into that trap right now in my life. Like, I don't feel sufficiently self-assured in my skills to not get captured, if you like, by the success or by the whatever. So I'm like, nope, I will refund $4,000. I will delay making a bunch of money if I want to, and I'll delay whatever it is in the higher purpose of being someone who can keep doing this for 40 years rather than fall off the track at year 2, ultimately.
Yeah. I respect the shit out of that. It's awesome, dude. It's funny too, like, so I'm thinking about the arena right now and the way that it kind of materialized was like, there was initially an impetus, just like, I want to create something to compete with Ship30 because fuck those guys. Like, that was the initial sort of like antagonistic, and like, it's not really a good place to operate from. Like, I'm trying to sort of not paint the world in these like binary good marketers versus evil marketers way. I don't want to operate from that frame, even though I know it's really effective. It's like a great storytelling mechanism, and it gets people fired up. And but like I don't want to I don't want to play the game that way. But like even though that was the original impetus, I kind of just started like doing this process myself, like the arena process that I like kind of outlined, and started just like fucking around. Like, what can I do in like these little 1 week sprints where I'm just like playing around with something that's alive? And I did it like 4 or 5 times for myself, and it was like, holy shit, this is this is something that I really enjoy myself. Because like I don't know, like everything I'm doing these days is ostensibly about individuation in one form or another. It's about me breaking all these old patterns of rigidity that I had picked up from the creative and the marketing and the business worlds and personal development. Like there's so much bullshit I have to unlearn from personal development land.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. And in truly just becoming myself, like becoming like finding the wholeness that was there sort of all along by stripping away all of these various things that I had picked up. And by feeling into the process myself and like coming to really embody it, like that feels like what makes the arena what it is. And like what gives it like that potential is it's something that I want to keep coming back to myself, because I designed it for me to become the kind of person that I want to be. Knowing that if my goal as a marketer is just to find the others, like people who are on this same sort of wavelength, on the same sort of developmental path. But it's like there is something there around just embodying the thing and leading by example, as opposed to just like saying the thing out loud, or like saying things that sound good but not actually living it. Like people can tell, man. Like it's really, really uncanny how people can tell, even if you're saying all the right things. And I don't know what that is or where it comes from. We clearly have like finely tuned like bullshit, this like sensors or whatever. But yeah, and I'm realizing in retrospect that this is a big part of the reason that my first business was so frustrating, even though I was following all of the best practices to a T. Is there was an inauthenticity there, because I was no longer a filmmaker, and I wasn't living the life that I was talking about, and it always felt forced for that reason. And I think people could sense it. Like, yeah, I don't know, man.
It's a really interesting one, I think, because it makes sense that people have really finely tuned sensors for detecting lying, ultimately, or deception, or whatever it might be. The tricky thing, I think, is on the creator side is recognizing when you're doing the deception at the same time. So like I keep falling into this, like keep noticing it. Sometimes I can notice it quickly. Sometimes I notice it a bit too late with Playful Creativity, for example. I'm like, oh, I've fallen into the doing authenticity trap. Or something in the past has worked where I said something, people liked it. I was like, oh, I can just do that again. But the intention the first time was just, as you were saying, like fuck around and find out, or just being playful and see what happens. The second time I was trying to recreate an outcome because it worked the first time. Yeah. And that's different. And some people will notice it, some people won't. But I noticed it, and I felt weird and icky at that point. Now it's very, very difficult, I think, to continually do only playful things. Like best practices are good for, like, certain things of doing things are good because, like, okay, people like my newsletter, or, you know, this joke I make is funny, whatever, cool. This is part of who I am. That's an authentic expression of myself. But there is a line at some point where it becomes, I'm doing a thing that I have tested it works because I'm hoping it gets an outcome that I want, which is different from other things it could be.
Yeah. Well, so this is where like the marketer and me, like, because there is something around, like, the essence of what our job is in a lot of ways as creators is communication, effective communication. and learning to bring people from point A to point B. And like as creators, as teachers, as people who are trying to communicate ideas or get people results, like, and it's what marketing is too. It's right. It's hoping to get somebody from point A to point B, even though I think I just completely turned that idea on its head with the whole non-coercive marketing thing, which maybe we'll talk about. But I don't know. It just feels so true to me that there's utility in noticing the patterns of what resonates in other people, and then keeping that in your back pocket as a tool, because ultimately that feels like the real game of both teaching and marketing and creating and contenting, or whatever the fuck any of this is this game of mattering to people, is resonating with people, and bringing them, like creating these journeys for them, or creating like bits and pieces in a journey for them where they can encounter something that you've done that is likely going to resonate. So there is something there around like noticing that, and like noticing something that you do from a playful standpoint and being like, oh, that really seemed to hit a nerve. Like, it feels, I don't know, it feels kind of self-defeating to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to throw this away because I have to be completely authentic and playful forever.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering like what the way is to like use that tool in a way, like create I don't know, and maybe it's, create an evergreen asset that just like lives somewhere that you can like point people to. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it depends on the context, but it feels like there's so much value in being really hyper attuned to how your work is connecting with other people, and being like, oh, okay, there's something really important here. But then I think it takes some like real self-mastery to not be a total sort of manipulative douchebag with that, for lack of a more delicate way of putting it. Not to use it to manipulate others. Like, how can I take this knowledge of what resonates, of what matters, of what leads people to trust me, and how can I use it in a playful, non-coercive way, if that makes sense? I'm just kind of riffing here, so feel free to like just completely interrupt me. But there is something there around just pattern matching, around being really in tune with what other people are experiencing, and then using that knowledge, because fundamentally our craft, our profession, or whatever this is about communicating and being understood and creating resonance in other people.
Totally. And I guess I could clarify my position earlier. It's like, I don't think it's the tools that are the issue, it's the intent behind how they're used. So I think this is why, to some extent, what is the tool? It's not Dickie's tool, but like there's a Twitter tool or like a social media tool where it has like formats, like tweet formats, ultimately. Whereas like compelling statement.
Is it Hype Fury?
Hype Fury, one of those. Yeah, exactly. Where it's just like full of templates of like tweet templates. And the issue with
it's the worst name ever for a tool.
Oh, it's terrible. But
like why? I don't like hype, don't like fury.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like either of these things. Why put them together? But like when I see those templates, I feel manipulated. And when I see people using those templates, I feel like you don't actually care about the message, really, do you? Or you're not doing this in a fun way. You're using a tool that psychologists, marketers have figured out will grab my attention and cause me to click. And the intent behind that might be good. Like, I can see people using those formats in a way that serves a good intention and serves a playful, unfixated intention. And I suspect in those moments that same template wouldn't have the same like weird vibe that I get from it. But I think those things can easily support the bad intention, the like, I just want to get followers, I just want to get money intention. And that's when we get the weird vibe. So I'm very here for like, communication is great. Good communication tools are great. Telling stories we've done for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, fine and good. But it's one, like, imagine telling a story so that you'll follow me versus so that you'll learn something, right? There's a very different thing there. That I think is what we're kind of pointing to.
Dude.
And I think it's a segue into non-coercive marketing. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think this is a segue into Depot Canis, which is
Oh,
itself a segue into
yeah. Okay.
non-coercive marketing. Because I don't know, for me, like Depot Canis is kind of like the underpinning of all of these new ways of being, like non-coercive ways of being, saying I love you from a place of being whole yourself and not needing it to be reciprocated, creating marketing that is just generous and informative and interesting without it necessarily being something where you're trying to, like pull people's little levers.
Mm.
Um, I talk about this in my, like, the big article I released a couple weeks ago, is like this idea of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Um, the insight that I came to is, like, I've always believed that was how we should approach our marketing, like market to others as you would want to be marketed to yourself. But like my big realization was that when I was at war with myself, when I was sort of like constantly forcing and coercing myself and using all sorts of like crazy high pressure on myself to force myself to do things that I thought I should do, like when that was my whole default state of being, um, there was a ton of that in my marketing too. And I saw no problem with it because it was just sort of like the emotional water that I swam in. So when I had a shitty relationship to myself and I was at war with myself, it there was really no way for me to market non-coercively because I had no sense of what that actually was.
Mm.
Like, and I had like, even though there was like an inkling that marketing that way to others was not the right way to go about it, like I really didn't have that many qualms with it. Um, so there's something here around Depot Canis being like the foundational work for all of this, where once you're deeply okay and secure in yourself and loving and whatever, not at war with yourself, there's a bunch of different ways to frame it. But like that feels like the thing that makes non-coercive marketing possible, the thing that makes like truly loving and secure relationships possible. And like
Mm.
this is the funny thing, is like non-coercive marketing really is about relating to other people and like telling, it's like it's basically just relationship advice, like really good relationship advice.
Right.
um but there's, yeah, there's something there around, you can know all of, like, I can tell you what non-coercive marketing is and you can grok it intellectually and be like, yeah, I'm there. But I've kind of come to believe that if you're at war with yourself, like that is eventually going to spill out in terms of how
Mm.
you do your marketing and how you treat other people, because I have seen it so reliably in myself. I've seen it so reliably with the people I've coached. And when I look around the creator economy ecosystem, whatever the fuck it's called, like I see a lot of really well intentioned people who think they're doing like really ethical marketing, but it's clear that they're at war with themselves in some capacity. So I don't know where I'm going with this other than to say, like, it's probably the highest leverage work that humanity could be doing in any way. Like,
Mm.
and it's the highest leverage work that I've done over the last 2 years, is all of the emotional work. Like AOA in particular has been mind-boggling. Art of Accomplishment, Joe Hudson stuff, for anybody who's curious about this.
I'm actually going to be doing a
Where else am I
recorded
going with
call
this?
with Luli about this, the intersections
Ooh,
of Alazan technique and the view framework that is taught by Joe Hudson in AOA in the connection course. So there's
hell
stay tuned because that's an interesting rabbit hole, I think.
yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Very. Um, where was I going with that? So I don't know where I was going, but like that's kind of for me like the foundational point of operating non-coercively in the world, whether it's in your marketing and how you show up with an audience, so to speak, or how you show up with your friends, with your
Mm.
parents, with your partner or dates or whatever. Like so much of it sort of stems from accepting yourself. Yeah.
I love the idea that your internal conflict will show up in the outside world if you haven't at least noticed it. Maybe not resolve it, but be aware of it so that you don't like accidentally play it out with people around you or your audience or your students or your whatever's, right? There's something really powerful in that. I did not think we'd go into deep okayness in this conversation, but now that you've highlighted it,
Yeah.
it is the same thing.
Yeah. It's all, and I don't know, like more and more, I'm like, yeah, there's something around like Sasha for coining that term. Like it's just like the perfect term to meme it into existence for more people because
Yeah.
self-love, like saying love yourself, has become kind of so trite and eye-rolly.
Yeah.
Whereas deep okayness has sort of just has like a really catchy edge to it. I don't know. There's something like really compelling there, but it feels like the work, like the foundational work for all of this. And it's responsible for pretty much all of the big shifts I've made in my life over the last 18 months or whatever.
And the thing about deep okayness is interesting because it ties back to the coercion point earlier on, or like just love yourself doesn't really get at the meat of the issue. Whereas deep okayness, the way people get there is by noticing all the different parts of themselves and loving all of them, if you like. So even the parts that you don't want to love, like, oh, there's a part there that I resist, that I think is bad, that blah, blah, this thing's shameful. Can I love that bit? Because it's very easy to kind of love the good parts of you when you say, yeah, I'm really like generous and kind and funny and like, yeah, that's loving yourself, but that's loving the good parts. That's loving the parts that's easy to love. Like it's whatever. Like find all the shit and then love that. And that's how you access deep okayness. Like love it unconditionally. And that's why I'm linking it back to the non-coercion. Like there's a part of you that wants to coerce. There is a drill sergeant. There is a whatever you want to call it. Love that as well. Like that also has good intentions. That's there to help you out and like wants good things. You know, don't push it away. Don't like say it's bad. Like find ways to love it such that it stops yelling it. Well, not even such that. Just love it and see what happens. There's no such that because that's itself a different trap. And then you end up in this place that you're finding, and a lot just flows from there, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah. And it flows effortlessly. Like this is the thing that keeps blowing my mind is how when I'm not at war with myself, like a lot of things that I used to struggle with, like massive like perfectionism and procrastination and like a lot of these things I was talking about, like constantly having to trudge or force my way through my work. A lot of it just seems to flow now, right? Like in both like the shit, what's that guy's name? Mahai just sent me high, like actual like flow, like getting into that psychological state of like really being present and at the edge of your capabilities and having fun and playful there. But yeah, there's just something about how effortless life can feel when you're deeply okay that I'm still boggled by after 2 decades of struggling and thinking that struggle was necessary, that struggle was virtuous, that all good things had to be born of struggle. Like these are kind of like beliefs that I had been carrying around.
And well, what's interesting? So yeah, it's the thing about the, the struggle thing. Oh, we got caught up in the lag. We were doing so well. The thing about like getting more energy, I think, is because of the tug of war metaphor. Like the internal tension in that rope that is being fought between two parts of you is energy that's not being played out there, if you like. And once you put the rope down, there's enormous tension that's suddenly liberated to do stuff. In an internal family systems frame, the parts of you that are protecting on it, fighting each other, suddenly have energy to do other stuff because they're no longer preoccupied with protecting you or managing you or whatever it might be to you. They can do other stuff and things feel easier because they're on, like, they're kind of all aligned in the same direction now, as opposed to like yelling internally at each other. This is not an easy journey to go on, but it's one that even starting on, I think people can find a lot of benefit from, like finding ways of like internal negotiation as opposed to internal yelling louder, if you like.
Yeah. What's funny is I haven't even done any proper internal family system stuff yet. That might be the next frontier for me. But yeah, it's wild how much how much energy is freed up by, yeah, recognizing those patterns where you might go into some sort of like anxious, anxious fixated death spiral of some sort.
Mm, mm,
um, and just like letting go, just sort of like noticing it and choosing to love it, taking a few breaths, and very often
yeah.
whatever that tension is will just kind of release a little bit. Like, I
Mm,
don't know, there's something like really really profound there around creating, like noticing the patterns, and then what, I don't know, it's the Viktor Frankl quote that's not actually a Viktor Frankl quote, is like in the moment between stimulus and response,
yeah, there is a
is
space.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. More and more I feel like I'm able to really use that, and not just have it be a cool sounding quote, but
Yeah.
like there's increasing awareness of all of the patterns that will lead me on a, I don't know, like on a binge,
Mm,
or like, oh shit, I'm gonna go watch Netflix for 7 hours straight, which I actually
mm.
did over the past few days because I was a little burned out. um, Fourth season of Stranger Things is actually pretty dope. Who knew? um, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, there is something there, and it's a skill, like it's a
Mm,
practice thing.
mm.
And I don't know, most of the time I don't seem to get it, and I still do fall into old ruts. But it's that slow spiral upward, I guess,
Mm.
of putting in the reps. And yeah,
There's a little Alexander Technique like teaching moment here that I want to bring up, which is the space between stimulus and response is something that you can notice and widen, right? That's where agency comes from, where you can make a new choice. So like, I notice that I'm going to binge on some food, I'm going to like pause and then make a different choice. And in AT, the thing that the skill, if you like, that creates that space is called inhibition. So you inhibit the urge, the response to do whatever. But the really critical thing that ties into non-coercion almost is that the way in which you say no to the thing is a way such that you could still say yes to the thing. So let's say you're like, oh, a cookie, and you get the urge to eat cookie, and you go like, no, not eat the cookie. There's two ways of saying no. There's one in which like, I will not eat the cookie. I'm not gonna eat the cookie. Like, and then you couldn't eat the cookie, and then like
yeah,
pause, and then like, you know what? I am gonna have the cookie actually, right?
yeah,
In such a way as you could still say yes to the thing and not just forcing a no. Um, and that I think is what allows for aliveness and playfulness, because you're not forcing yourself around. You're not saying to the part that wants a cookie, no, you're bad for wanting a cookie. You're literally, all you're doing,
yeah.
the only thing you're doing is introducing space to orient, look around, take in more information, check in with your values, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean you're not going to do the thing. It just means that you're like pausing. That's it, and it's a much more gentle frame internally, than like forcing no ultimately.
Well, it's it's a more gentle frame, and there's like this really interesting thing that I've discovered specifically with food, which is that if I make the empowered decision to be like, yes, I'm going to eat the cookie,
Mm-hmm.
that then the experience of eating the cookie is so much richer and more
Mm,
vibrant than it would otherwise be. And it's not filled with like this heavy sense of like shame and like, oh, I'm such a fuck up, and it's kind of like a
mm,
mindless, just like, oh, I'm eating this cookie and like just because I need a sugar crash. But like there's something like you can be really like present and embodied and just enjoy, like actually enjoy the cookie
mm,
for cookie's sake, and it loses a lot of the power that it had over you
yeah.
before. Like there's something really powerful there. It's like I think it was like 2 months ago. I decided to test this out with pizza, which has long been one of those things that just like fucks me up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had kind of this abusive relationship. Um, and there was one night where I was like feeling really good and empowered, and I had the urge, and I was like, no. But then I was like, wait a minute, what if I just like ate it
Mm.
and enjoyed it? And then I did, and it made me feel like shit. Like I was like way more in tune with
Yes.
like how my body was reacting to this, and I was like, oh, I'm heavy, and like it feels like I just need to go nap now.
Mm.
um but yeah, it was interesting, like not only did I enjoyed it initially, but I was also then like more in tune on the back end of like,
Mm,
how is this affecting me like physiologically and emotionally? Like there was like a clarity to my awareness around all of these things that was like never available to me before, when I was stuck in that really like rigid emotional dynamic of, like the ping pong or the
mm,
tug of war.
mm,
Because usually before, like if I had that really rigid no, like the really forceful no, like no, I can't do this because I'll be a piece of shit if I do.
mhm, mhm,
Um, Eventually, like that would create so much pressure that I would end up doing it anyway. And I would, I'd eat the pizza or whatever, and it would be just kind of, yeah, it'd be mindless, right? Just
mm,
like eat it like really fucking fast, like and furious, and then not really be aware of any of like the sensations or any of it.
mm,
Like it's wild, just like how different these two ways of approaching it can be.
mm. It's funny, you're pointing at the same thing that a lot of meditators find, or just people who do awarenessy stuff, and that they just naturally stop drinking because they just don't like it anymore. Like they're
Yeah,
suddenly aware of like, oh, this kind of sucks actually. I just feel sick. Oh, and the same with food. It's like it often looks like people are trying to be virtuous. Like, oh, I'm a meditator and I eat salads, as if it's some part of like some identity thing. I'm sure that does exist, but also like I
yeah,
just now realize that eating certain things doesn't make me feel good, and I want to feel good. So why would I eat the thing that makes me feel bad? But going into it with awareness
yeah.
means that you can sustain awareness somehow. Whereas like the forceful no seems to like cut us off from something. Like, I'm not going to have the cookie. Oh, but I had the cookie. I'm bad. And then you're like, you're not really there because it's so like there's another layer of discomfort in that you did the thing that you told yourself you wouldn't do, in a sense. So like you're just averse to the whole experience in a sense. But if you're like, cool, I had a cookie. Oh, I appear to feel like crap. Look at that. Like
Yeah.
it gets rid of the layer of judgment that interferes with true seeing, I think, or at least clearer seeing.
Mm. I don't know, I'm thinking about this with food right now and how there's this multi-billion, I don't know, it might trillion-dollar industry, who the fuck knows,
Mm,
around dieting and like these really rigid top-down rules of what humans should eat. Even though like the longer I've looked at nutritional science, like the less any of it actually makes sense, and it's all conflicting and nobody knows what the fuck is going on. But it, like, I don't know, it feels like it's this same thing of like when we're insecure in the marketing landscape and we look to experts, we look to gurus, we look to people who've ostensibly figured it out and who are willing to give us those really comfortable, easy answers. When in fact, there's a move here of like your your body knows what it needs
mm,
to nourish itself if you trust it and give it the time and space it needs to actually do that, and you like develop the awareness practice to actually like listen and tune into it. And it feels the same way with creative work, with
mm,
marketing, with business, is like going through the arena process. Like there's something there around, you try something for a week, try it on, see how it feels, see how it resonates with you. If you publish it in the world, see how it resonates with others. And but there's this sort of like embodied knowing that when something is a good fit, you just kind
mm.
of know.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
because you've like thought yourself into like this perfect thing, but and I don't know, this is something as like a as somebody who likes to have concrete answers and as somebody who teaches marketing ostensibly. I don't think I really teach marketing anymore, but um like it's been really really hard for me to communicate this stuff because it sounds woo, it sounds so vague, and I'm still trying to like reconcile like how do I be an effective teacher in the world and get people to this place where they're trusting themselves. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm kind
Mm,
of on a tangent, but it's one of those things that's always top of mind for me, is knowing that people love crunchy specific answers to things,
yeah.
even though yeah, even though like the real game is them finding their own answers.
Mm, I love that. Uh, there's something here, I think, around trust as well. Like going back to that love analogies of before, there's a sense of loving someone and trusting that they'll stay, or trusting that they'll love you back, or like not forcing, as opposed to like the opposite, which is I don't trust. I don't trust that I'm good enough. I don't trust that you really love me. I don't trust that you'll hang around. Blah blah blah. And it makes me think back to the traditional marketing versus non-coercive marketing. So if we are coercive because we lack trust, let's say, and traditional marketing doesn't trust something as yet to be defined, what do you think it is that your non-coercive marketing does trust that traditional marketers lack trust in?
Yeah. Well, what the thing that it just trusts people. It trusts
Mm.
that people can make empowered decisions for themselves without being manipulated or coerced into a decision that you have already made for them. Like that's at the root of this like kind of binary thing between traditional and non-coercive marketing. Is like traditional marketing is deeply authoritarian. It starts from the position that you, as the creator, the marketer, the company, that you have the best answers and the optimum answers for quote unquote the market,
Mm.
like this vague abstract conception, which really is just a bunch of individual people who are all different, but you lump them together and treat them as if you have the right answer for them. And then you use all of these emotional tools. Like this is what a funnel is, right? You get people into this, you put them on this path towards making the decision that you have already made for them, and you try to convince them that it is their decision all along.
Mm.
um, so it is deeply, yeah, it's like the textbook definition of authoritarianism. It's trying, like it's exerting top down control and using these very subtle but powerful emotional manipulations, the things we know about human psychology and our emotional decision making processes, in order to get people to buy into
Mm.
the decision that you want them to make because it pads your bottom line, right? Non-coercive marketing is about trusting people to make empowered decisions for themselves. So there's a couple pieces to it. Like one of them is you have to kind of trust yourself first. Like trust that if you tell the truth about who you are, what you create, why it exists, how it works, like what results people can expect, like whatever is giving people all of the information they need to make an empowered decision for themselves, basically. And then letting the chips fall where they may. It's basically surrendering the outcome, saying, for some of you, this probably will not work. It's not the right thing. That's okay. For some of you, maybe it is, like whatever. But it's
Mm.
ceding authority, ceding the need for things to happen on your own timeline to the market,
Mm.
basically, to individual people, and coming right out and saying, like, I trust you to make this decision for yourself. If it's a fuck yes, you know how to come into this world, accept this invitation.
Mm.
If it's a no, I still respect you.
Mm.
Like you're not a, like, because that's one of the things that traditional marketing does, is it creates this sort of like ultimatum feeling where if you if you say no to a product, like it makes you feel worse,
Mm.
like you're yeah, like I'm trying to think of like a good example of this. Like it happens a lot in like the personal development world. Like if you don't enroll in such and such, then you're just going to go back to your shitty life
Mm.
as it is.
Mm.
And maybe it's not quite that explicit, but like that dynamic plays out. And you see it with like pop-ups, right? Sometimes there's a pop-up and it's like, yes, I would like to accept this freebie offer to like shred my abs, or no, I want to stay like a flabby fat fuck forever. And like
Mm.
that's the actual copy they use. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I guess I'm turning this down. But like they're really twisting the knife on you and making saying no a disempowering thing for you.
Mm.
Whereas the non-coercive thing is like, whether you say yes or no, like it is your decision and you should feel really fucking good about it either way. Like,
Mm.
and I am not going to tip the scales in one way or another. I'm just going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to show up in the way that feels truthful and real and alive to me, and trust that if it's alive for you, if like you feel resonance with what I'm doing or what I've created, then you actively making that choice to come into my world to become a customer is going to be a far more powerful choice than if I sort of like manipulated you into doing it by twisting and playing on your insecurities.
Oh, that's awesome. I might even like clip that entire section out as its own standalone little video because it was so good. Like encapsulation of Rob's thing. Um, I know what you mean exactly. The one that gets me is countdowns. Like particularly when you like you go to like a workshop or some kind of like lead gen thing, and then like for the next 30 minutes or the next hour, you have $100 off. I'm like, I will, in principle, not buy your thing now. Even if I wanted the thing, I will not be manipulated like this. Like, I don't appreciate the way that you're messing with me. Like, there's no reason that this thing should be cheaper for an hour. This is also largely why I avoid sales too much. I'm like, for the next, whatever, it's like 20% off. Like, why? Why should some people pay less just because I'm like trying to make a quick buck almost? Like, the value hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate these tactics. And what you're pointing at really is like the integrity of people being able to say no and like being able to make good choices. Right? If you respect that someone can understand their own preferences and say like, you know what, I don't want this, and you say, cool, awesome, I'm really happy that you know what you want, and this is not it. Yay! It's a very different thing from like, your loss.
Yeah. Dude, it's funny the countdown timer thing. You know Sam Sager, right?
On Twitter, yes.
Do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he and I have become homies. He's become like my non-coercive exercise guy. Like that's his whole jam, and he's fucking awesome at it. But he ended up buying Thrivecart, and we had a conversation afterwards, and he was like, I like he like because you bought Thrivecart as well. You know their whole like lifetime deal thing that has been going on for like 7 years, and it's always just on the verge. You land on their landing page and it's like, oh no, this lifetime deal is going to go away in 47 minutes. And that's what got me to buy Thrivecart in 2016 or 2017 or something like that. And like they're still just going, and it's wild to me, right? It's like I don't know, like Sam was talking about like how he felt so kind of like used and abused and manipulated by that whole process. And like, he's like, I know I got hijacked. I saw that countdown timer and it was like, oh fuck, I've got to make a decision right now. And like that shit works. But like what it leads to on the other end is people who are full of self-doubt. They don't trust you. They don't really know if they want that product. And it took like because that's the thing, like I like Thrivecart as a product, and it's constantly being like updated, and it's like, it does what it's supposed to do. But operating that way on the front end does not create happy customers or empowered customers. Or I use this phrase aligned and empowered. Like aligned customers are people who really vibe with you and resonate with you and your worldview and the way you operate. Like it's finding the others basically. And empowered customers are people who made a fuck yes decision. Like it was their decision, and they chose of their own free will, their own agency to jump further into your world because it was beneficial and meaningful to them, not because you coerce them or nudge them over the line. So like those are the things that I optimize for. And it was funny that like Thrivecart created a customer in Sam, but he was neither of those things, right? It was kind of like disempowered and out of alignment. And he was like, fuck, I should probably just refund this. And it's like so much marketing starts from that place of like, just how do we create a customer by any means necessary? Not realizing all these really shitty downstream effects. Because you can kind of bet your ass that like Sam is never going to refer people to Thrivecart. And he might one day. Because like I got over my distaste for them just because the tool is good and lifetime deals are dope. But like there's something there around like you're neutering what makes marketing work, which is like mattering to people and mattering so much that they want to tell their friends. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
It's funny. I also use Thrivecart, and I kind of like make myself forget that they had that annoying, because now when I log in, I never see I go straight to my dashboard. I never see the landing page of like special offer. I'm like, when I do occasionally see it, I'm like, oh no, I forgot that I bought it for the same reason, and it feels bad. And it makes me think like the people, who, as you were saying, people who you attract go through into your community, into your course, into your whatever, your world. Like they pass through the hurdles that you put up there, and if the hurdles are coercive, then you're filtering people to either be okay with that, or who are pissed off with that, or who just didn't notice, I guess. And
Yeah.
yeah, the people I want in my circles are people who don't feel forced into anything, who made a fuck yes decision, and who are very much aware, ideally, of the games I'm playing towards them. Otherwise, you end up with people who aren't really serving your highest purpose, and you're not serving theirs either. So I want to see
Yeah.
this spread more and more. It occurred to me that another version of this is, let's say, you look at your metrics for your a SaaS thing, maybe like a software thing, and you have metrics at the front end. You're like, oh yeah, this conversion rate, like 5% people like see this page and buy and whatever. And then at the end, you have like unsubscribe metrics. So you have like, oh, 3% of people don't renew or whatever it might be. And there's two ways you can go with that, right? So in one hand, you can go like, in what way did we upstream create the conditions that created them leaving? Or you can go, how do we trap them? How do we like prevent unsubscribes? And you get like the dark pattern nonsense of like the New York Times
Yeah.
to unsubscribe,
New
phone
York
up, go through
Times.
like a really long like chain, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, that is not the way, New York Times. That is not the way. That is coercive and evil. Don't do it.
I love that the New York Times is just like synonymous with like dark pattern customer entrapment.
Yeah.
Like, and we all just like know it. It's just like, fuck you, never again.
Yeah.
Every time I hit their paywall, I'm just like, nope, I'm not doing this game. We're done.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me want to like go into maybe the last thing we talk about, given that we're going for like an hour and 40 minutes, which is a thing I saw you tweet about, and I forget who named it this, but like building a more beautiful internet, or Bambi, which I love as a name.
Bambi.
Bambi. Can you tell us about Bambi? Like, what's the story there?
Maybe. I think it's a combination of everything we've talked about so far. Like it's kind of like the deep, like it's people doing the creative work that only they can do. So that's what the arena is like breaking free from like these sort of like rigid stale mimetic patterns and all the best practices, and coming back to themselves and creating what feels alive, because so much of the internet feels dead. It just feels like a copy of a copy of a copy of people repeating the same boring dead ass playbooks that were like unexciting 5 years ago, but now they're just like, I don't know. You can tell how cynical I am about a lot of this. But seeing work that is truly alive, like this is what's made me thrilled about Teapot, right? Is like it's largely not playing any of the internet marketer bullshit best practice games. And there are people who are on these journeys of individuation themselves and just like exploring their nerdiness. Like they're going deep into these rabbit holes of curiosity and just following them and creating these public artifacts and blogs and YouTube videos, like Toshin, right? Toshin is like the best example of like, follow your curiosity and just like make really cool shit on the internet for your friends. And like his whole presence is just electric, right? Like he just does some of the most interesting, unique work of really anybody, mostly because he's just following his curiosity wherever the hell it happens to go, and it goes to some weird places. But so that's like one piece, is like, what does it look like when not just like a small little niche subculture like Teapot is full of people who are individuating and creating like I don't know, doing I need maybe better terminology for this, but I have a sense that every human is creative. I think creativity is our birthright as humans. It's like part of like the beauty and the richness of being human. And there's something here, like just like sensing the potential of what could be created if people were unleashed to actually trust themselves and just create what felt most alive to them, as opposed to staying locked in these really rigid narrow, boring ways of being on the internet, which it feels like are permeating like everything.
Yeah.
I wrote a manifesto a while ago about quote unquote the pattern. And like that's what it is. It's operating out of fear and then playing these really small, boring, predictable games. Um, so that's one piece of it. Is like, what if the internet was just like rich and vibrant and creative because everybody was like really leaning into what made them come alive instead of like playing bullshit analytics games of like what's going to make me go viral or what, it's just like what's true and alive for me. Another piece of it I think is the non-coercive marketing thing, right? Is I have this I have this theory, I guess, that once people get a taste of what it's like to be marketed to non-coercively, to be fully trusted and
Mm.
respected and seen as an individual and have the ball in their court, like I think that creates an emotional experience that like once they then go back and other people are marketing to them coercively with all this sort of like sort of like authoritarian, I've made your decisions for you kind of thing, that it's not going to be palatable the way that it once was.
Mm.
And I kind of see non-coercive marketing spreading organically through the internet into, because like the people who come to Ungated exist in all of these different niches and subcultures and topics and areas. Like I kind of see them going out into the world, into their respective corners of the internet, and changing those corners of the internet for the better by
Mm.
being the person who's willing to lead by example and to market non-coercively. I think that's the kind of thing that, again, once people get a taste of what it's like to be trusted, they don't
Mm.
want to go back to people who aren't trusting them and who are trying to coerce and pull them forward. So I kind of think there's like an organic culture change thing that's going to be built into this, where as people experiences, their preferences are going to change. The markets are going to start favoring non-coercive businesses, which is going to force other people who are coercive to start adapting to these new ways. And so I see this world where it's full of creative, like individuated creative work that's really fueled by aliveness and curiosity and connection, and people building these, and that's the thing, right, is like not everybody needs to build an online business. Like that's just
Mm.
kind of the context I exist in. But people then starting to treat each other from a place of trust. Like
Mm.
it's wild to me to think that, but like I don't know, like I see all of this potential in what the internet is. And it feels like the conditions are ripe for like these bottom up cultural changes that may exist, or that may be just like little seeds right now, but over 5 years, 10, 15, 20, like I imagine that we could get to an internet that is is just like utterly would be utterly incomprehensible to us if we saw it right now,
Mm.
because we're so used to an internet that's like really cynical and analytics driven, and people playing all of these like really rigid narrow status games. Like what is like the full actualized potential of the internet when people are optimizing for aliveness and for
Mm.
connection and trusting people? Like that is a more beautiful internet for me. And like that, so that's what the hashtag is, right? Building a more beautiful internet in Bambi. And I think it was demonic,
Mm.
however the
Yes.
hell you pronounce his username, who like coined that term. But that's kind of like the overarching, like, holy shit, we're dreaming big, ambitious vision of what Ungated
Mm.
is like moving towards this internet that is really fueled by trust.
Mm. Love it. I love it. I kind of want to ask, like, if some marketer is watching this and like has seen the light, they want to change and they want to kind of move into like creating this more beautiful internet, like how should they begin? What advice would you give them to like start on this journey?
Oof. It's interesting. So I have my own membership for Ungated that I'm in the process of rebranding it to the Frontier. Like,
Cool.
so I'm gonna have the arena and the Frontier. And like I'm really big on this metaphor of going out on the frontier, because it is like non-coercive marketing, as I've laid it out, is subversive and risky as fuck, right?
Mm.
Like it is really risky to totally cede control to people and trust that you can still build a business that is actually going to work from that. And like I can't necessarily promise, and I don't know, this is why again, like I'm back on this whole like don't make a living quickly, get a day
Mm.
job, make sure your financial needs are met, make sure you're able to operate from a place of deep okayness, because like that's really what makes a lot of this work possible is sort of like the inner work and making sure you feel safe and secure in the world. Because if you're operating from a place of insecurity and scarcity, like it's just gonna undermine all of these things.
Mm.
From there, I don't know, man. Like it's one of those things. Is like my favorite thing is getting people to ditch marketing tactics or best practices that they think they have to do, but they've never felt aligned with, and just giving people permission to like you don't actually have to do that anymore. And then watching as like an actual somatic weight falls off as they're like, oh, thank God. And then like you can start
Yes.
like so it's I think maybe what I'm getting at is that it's kind of a subtractive process.
Mm.
It's not just like one day you're a traditional marketer and then the next you're like, yeah, boy, I'm non-coercive now. Like I don't think you can just make that leap
Yeah.
because there are so many different emotional layers to what constitutes traditional marketing. So I think there's a big deep okayness piece and self-awareness piece, and really really like learning to peel back like all of the different things that you thought were essential for
Mm.
you to be successful in the world, and seeing that you can still succeed with people even when you're not doing those things. Like that's the thing, right? Is like most of my selling over the past like 2 or 3 months, like I sold a workshop and I sold the arena, most of it just came from me goofing around on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
which like I knew it was possible from watching you and Sasha and other people, but I never would have been able to do that 2 years ago. Um, and it took a long time for me to like actually immerse myself in the community and sort of like build a reputation and embody a lot of this stuff. Um, and so I don't know what I'm getting at. I think this is kind of like an all over the place answer, but I think it's a process, and that's why like I'm calling it like being out on the frontier,
Mm.
right? Is like join communities of people who are thinking this way, whether it's mine or anybody else's, and really like yeah, embrace the uncertainty of it, because it is going to be uncertain, and that is going to make you uncomfortable and everybody else uncomfortable. And like I think that the only thing that's going to prevent us from building a more beautiful internet is us running in the opposite direction of uncertainty, right?
Nice. I love
Like
it.
that's only going to get us back to where we are. Yeah.
Mm. I think that's a great place to probably wrap up for the conversation. Final question is, where can people find you on the internet? And if they want to dig deeper into like your philosophy and your stuff, what options do they have?
Yeah. I'm ungated creative on Twitter. That's where I mostly like shit post, and it's wild how little I actually talk about these things on Twitter. I should start doing that more. Um, my main website is ungated.media. I have a new one that I'm working on that we didn't talk about today that's called ungated.life. I'm really leaning into this ungated thing. Um, I think that's it, man. Like it's just Twitter and websites.
Nice.
Pretty dope.
Well, pretty dope. And I really enjoy Ungated as a space, like just little delightful things everywhere, lots of clearly like intentional design and thoughtfulness behind it. So yeah, if anyone's curious, go check it out. And thank you, Rob.
Oh, we didn't even talk about Oases.
Oh,
Oasis.
you're right.
Oases. Yeah.
Oases.
Yeah.
Next time we'll do a
Yeah.
part
Next
two.
time.
Yeah.
We could do yeah. Hell yeah, dude. No, this was so fun, man. Just flew by. Could do a few more hours if we wanted to.
No, I think we should see if there's demand from the people, and if there isn't, we'll do it anyway. So thanks a lot, Rob.
Because it's alive.
I love how now that we're doing more of like conversational thing, we're encountering the lag again. So I think we did a great job of like somehow managing to not
Yeah.
come up against this thing up until now.
Yeah. but now we're trying to land the plane and it's just a total disaster.
Exactly. So let's just do it abruptly. So thanks a lot, Rob, and yeah, see you around.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.